Wolverines and Scarlet Knights, noon on Saturday, as we welcome in Anthony Bellino. You see him every morning right here on BCSN as part of the X's and Bros show. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Mark. Always a pleasure. You can't be 4-0 if at first you don't get to 3-0, although that was a little sketchy there on Saturday night. Probably the best thing about that football game was the brand new light show. And in fact, you thought maybe there'd be a little bit more juice, a little bit more energy there from the maize and blue side, but Falcons put up quite a fight there early on in that game. Was proud of Bowling Green for the way that they went out there and competed. And I want to, I guess, extend my thoughts is maybe the best way to put it for their couple of serious injuries. I mean, the medical cart, I mean, it was like a taxi. It was two players from Bowling Green that had to use the cart. Hardiman, the last I saw for Demetrius is that, obviously moving his hands on the field, that was a good thing. And then for Levi, they put the air cast on his leg. That's never a good situation when you see that. We also had multiple members, both BG and Michigan, have members of their band go down during that game. And we had a fan fall over the ledge at Michigan Stadium, in which the cart had to go get that individual that caused a little bit of a stoppage in the game. So it was kind of a weird night there Saturday night.
Let's begin with that third victory for the Wolverines. It never really was in doubt, but I thought Bowling Green had a pretty good game plan, and perhaps if they didn't have all those injuries, particularly at the quarterback position, Bowling Green could have made it affect a closer game. How much was that Bowling Green? How much was that Michigan just maybe not playing their best on Saturday night?
Mark, I really didn't feel as if Michigan wanted to necessarily be there. Every once in a while you're going to come out and you're going to lay an egg. Like, that's football. It happens. It happens on a week-to-week basis. That's the most challenging task for college coaches, is because if you lay an egg at the NFL level, you always have next week. If you do that in college, especially in non-conference play, and we saw a lot of high-ranked teams really struggle. I mean, look at what Florida State went through with Boston College. At least it's a Power 5 opponent, but Florida State was playing some really good football leading into that game. Michigan, I mean, they score on their opening drive, and it was 4 plays, and it was just all on the ground, and it was like, okay, it's going to be one of those types of games. Their second possession, they go ahead and throw a pick. Now, if this would have been, maybe if this was Penn State, if it was Ohio State, maybe another Big Ten opponent, I'm not really sure at this point how good our conference is as a whole, this game could have been completely different. I think when you go top to bottom roster-wise, Michigan had the advantage, as you would expect them to, over Bowling Green, so they could withstand some of those mistakes. And they were mistakes. They were egregious. When you have, interception, like, you can't. J.J. McCarthy played about as poorly as he could play. I mean, he was completing about 87% of his passes going into that football game, one of the most accurate in the country. He had 5 touchdown passes, no picks, and then goes into that game and, apparently had some difficulty distinguishing between maize and blue and brown and orange, Mark. So a good night to have that kind of game against that opponent, because you can survive it. But I think it's going to be one of those games that's really the eye opener, if you will, the shock charge. I believe that JJ's that kind of athlete. He's going to look at this game. This is going to aggravate him. He will not rest well, and he'll come out this coming Saturday, guns blazing, ready to go, and probably be about as locked in as you can be. Obviously, with Jim Harbaugh returning to the sidelines, that's a huge momentum boost and a big kick right there to their backside to get him in gear. But not overall and I feel like I've been very open about this, very honest about this, especially on this program, on the radio in the morning as well. I do not believe that Michigan has shown anyone in the country any reason that they should be the second-ranked team in the nation. I think that ranking's way too high, and I think that they have benefited by playing lesser competition.
You mentioned it looked like a little bit of an off game for the Wolverines, and that's something that Jim Harbaugh and Blake Corum both talked about on Monday, that, yeah, you can have an off day. It happens, and particularly with J.J. McCarthy, I think the concern is, are we going to see a regression back to October 2021 in J.J. McCarthy, or is this just a blip on the radar and he's going to bounce back and do what we saw him do against TCU in the first couple weeks of this season?
I think it's just a blip. I really do. I think that, he knows, and one of the big learning lessons, so I'm trying to think, I think it's the third interception is coming. They're coming basically at our direction, so they're moving right to left across the TV. It happens maybe 15 yards in front of me. Just throw the ball away. And I'm sure that they have hammered that home in every quarterback meeting that they've had thus far following that game. He knows, watching that back, you just have to throw that football away. At the end of the day, even if it's 3rd and 16, if you don't have anybody open and you're not going to advance it with your legs, you have to get rid of the football and live to play another day. Now, the 3rd and 16 thing I bring up, okay, is the interception as good as a punt? Sure, semantics, and we can get into scenario. But in that particular scenario, just throw it into the bench. It like, you're outside the tackle box. There's a receiver in the area. It's not intentional grounding. Chuck it and live to play another day. There are some moments where he has forced some throws and he's thrown some footballs in some very tight windows, which when they are completed, you applaud them. When they're intercepted, it makes you scratch your head. It's a risk versus reward. I think that he will absolutely tighten this up. I don't think we'll see the regression. I think that this is really, I mean, think about it like this. Michigan had 3 receivers catch a ball, just receivers in general. Roman Wilson had 2 receptions. Cornelius Johnson had 3, and Colston Loveland had 3. That was it. I mean, JJ McCarthy was 8 of 13. And when you're running the ball 31 times, that's part of it. But at the same time, it's like, that's not the passing offense that we saw in weeks 1 or 2. So a little bit of a step back there. Maybe the best thing to happen to this team, a good, swift kick between the legs there to understand that, hey, if you make these mistakes, if you play like this, now that we're entering conference play, you will lose. And if you lose, you can kiss the Big Ten championship goodbye. You can kiss the college football playoff goodbye. Like, everything is at stake every single game for Michigan, especially now moving forward that they got through the powder puff portion of their schedule. And without really being tested, if I'm a Michigan fan, which I am, I am concerned. I am legitimately concerned, because what happens when this team actually gets tested by a team that can control the clock, that can control the time of possession, the ball, right? If they can run it effectively, if they can pass it effectively, how will Michigan respond? Because they haven't yet got punched in the face.
One of the things Michigan's taking away from this Bowling Green game, I think the mindset might be, we never lose a game. We either win or we learn from a game, and they won the game, and there's quite a bit they can learn from this game as well against BG.
Oh, absolutely. And I think defensively, like they have 10 tackles for loss, multiple sacks. That's Chris Wormley's big thing. D-line's got to get in there. Chris Jenkins on the defensive line had an interception, almost had a pick 6, which was pretty cool, was, tackled just shy of the goal line. So a good moment for him, who has, he's got a very high draft stock, but they've got to continue to dominate on the defensive side of the football in the trenches. They are going to absolutely have to do that. I thought that BG, 124 yards, receiving, 79 yards on the ground. You assume that the Michigan Wolverines are going to be they're going to overmatch Bowling Green up front, which is what they did. So I think that there are definitely things that you can learn from this game. The biggest one is, do not have moments of regret against teams that can make you pay, because they haven't played one of those yet. And what happens when a team actually does make them pay for these mistakes? That's what we have to find out.
And I think if we want to continue with this nitpicking theme, I think we can talk a little about the special teams play. That's one area that disappointed Jim Harbaugh, particularly the 2 fumbles on kickoffs, one that Bowling Green recovered, one Michigan got back on. But that maybe showed some future opponents a weakness of this Michigan team, that if you kind of kick it up high on those kickoffs, you get it to an up back who doesn't quite know what to do, isn't quite securing the ball well enough. That could be another momentum turner.
Yeah, for Max Bredesen, when he lost that football, I mean, he's a guy that can handle the ball in his hands. That's fine. Braden McGregor, strategically speaking, I don't know how many teams are going to want to try to, kick it high and maybe sort of engage in that. It might be something that a team looks at, especially if Rutgers, if this coming week, if Michigan can get a little bit of a lead on Rutgers, maybe they, go down and score and they try something like that now that it is on tape. But that's definitely got to be a point of emphasis, because special teams have to be special. It is what it is. You have to be able to block when it comes to, punting and field goal kicking. You have to be able to cover on kickoff and on your punt formation. Like special teams is the one area of the game that is consistently overlooked week to week, unless something bad happens, right? It didn't cost them this game. It could cost them in the future. Definitely. I mean, along with JJ's decision-making in this football game, and really the interception, to go back to that, I think it was the second one, which was in the back of the end zone. That just looked like a miscommunication. Like, that looked like, who are we throwing the ball to? Who was supposed to catch it? We got 2 guys going in 2 different directions, and somehow it ends up in the Bowling Green player's hands. Like, if you see it, go make a play for it. Just kind of is what it is there. So I'd be really interested to see what that play call was, and what the thought process in trying to diagnose exactly where he wanted to go with the football, and then what the outcome was, because that's what they'll talk about. That's what they'll go through, and that's what they'll clean up going into this week. But special teams, back to that, got to be special. A lot to clean up here. And I asked Chris Wormley about nitpicking, right? Are we being too critical? And looking back on it, Mark, I don't really think that we are. For every criticism that we had in weeks 1 and 2, and it's like, well, how bad do you have to beat an opponent? Well, when you play UNLV, when you play ECU, and you look around the country and the way that some of these other teams can move the football and the amount of points that they're putting on the board, you shouldn't have to punt. And I know that sounds crazy. It does. It sounds wild to even say that out loud, but your offense should be able to move effectively against these opponents to the point where, you're putting yourself in field goal position at minimum on most possessions until you have, your second and third team guys coming in to clean up the rest of the game. It's, maybe it was nitpicking a couple weeks ago. I think it's a giant red flag.
I think that goes along with being the second-ranked team in the nation and the back-to-back defending Big Ten champions. You've raised your game. You have to go a little bit higher if you want to get to the college football playoff for the third straight year, win a game in the college football playoff, win a national championship. So I agree with you. I don't know if nitpicking is the right word because you do get the win. It was almost like listening to Al Davis on Monday because Jim Harbaugh and Blake Corum, Josh Wallace, they all talk about you just got to win, just got to win. Winning week 1, week 2, week 3. But what you did those 3 weeks doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to win tougher competition.
Yeah, the transitive property doesn't necessarily work in sports. Like Team A beat Team B, but lost to Team C, so Team C should be able to beat Team B. Like, you just got to be able to kick it off or tip it off or whatever, drop the puck, whatever sport you're playing. And you have to be better than, the man in front of you on that particular day. Have they done that so far through 3 weeks? Oh, yeah, just win, baby. That's what you got to do. And you had to go 3-0. You had to win your non-conference. The schedule was set up, so that you'd be able to play your first month of games at home. And in those first 3 were not conference opponents they didn't have that, cross Power 5 matchup, that real marquee game. I think that speaks more to what Nick Saban has said in the past about the college football playoff committee not rewarding some of those tough matchups. I mean, you take a look at Michigan State, maybe a bad example because of everything that's going on there in East Lansing, but at least they had that game scheduled against Washington. There is week 3 in college football across the board. Like, at least LSU had a great opening game, even though they lost. At least they played somebody, right? And that's what we want more of, I think, in college football. And as we see the landscape continue to change year over year, whether it's NIL and transfer portal, conference realignment, all of these different things that are sort of, the perfect storm to get some significant change really in the mix where we could start to see some better matchups in the non-conference where maybe you see the Big Ten take on the SEC or the ACC or the Big 12 or whatever it might look like in the future, so that these teams are matched up against each other. And you have to be good, from week number 1 and forward. If you want to mix in a bye game in there at some point, sure, by all means, go right ahead. But I think that, when you look at these 3 weeks in general, sure, style points do not matter for anybody but the voters. And apparently, according to the AP, they're not looking at style points either. But there wasn't anything in there to really make you feel overly confident. I think that we could feel confident through 2 weeks in the way that JJ was throwing the ball. This past week makes you raise an eyebrow. But as I said, he's the kind of guy that I think locks in for the upcoming week at home against Rutgers, pardon me. And that's a game where he just unleashes hell. And he is going to be so dialed in because that's the kind of competitor that he is. That's what I expect from J.J. McCarthy. We'll see if that's what actually happens.
Competition will get a little tougher this week with Rutgers coming in. And granted, Rutgers is at best middle of the pack Big Ten team in the Big Ten East, but they are 3-0. They started off 3-0 last year and then went downhill from there. But 2 of those 3 wins this year over Power 5 opponents. They beat Northwestern to open the season, and they just beat Virginia Tech last week. And sure, it's not the Beamer boys of Virginia Tech, but it's still beating Virginia Tech. For Rutgers, that's a pretty high bar. And we've seen the Scarlet Knights play Michigan tough over the years.
Yeah, it's really weird. I saw a stat a couple weeks ago, and it was like average margin of victory during the Jim Harbaugh era. And everybody got in a tiz because apparently they missed the point of average margin of victory. So it would only be games in which they won. And here's the difference. And Rutgers was one, like Indiana was the other team, maybe Illinois and Rutgers were like the 3 that play them the closest. Maybe this is actually a good thing, what happened last week against Bowling Green, to wake them up for this Rutgers game. Because look, Gavin Wimsatt, like passing the ball effectively. I mean, he threw the ball for 46 yards. Like Rutgers against Virginia Tech, they ran it all over the place to the tune of 256. So Kyle, I think I don't know if it's Monagai, if that's how you say it. He's going to test this Michigan defense, and they are going to want to run the football. That is their MO. Let's see if it's a formidable challenge to test this defense a little bit. And it's Rutgers, right? And so if you couldn't get up for the game last week, now's a really good time to get your head screwed on straight, because it's Rutgers, it's Nebraska, and then we'll start to get to some of the meat and the potatoes of this thing.
How much of an impact does Jim Harbaugh returning to the sidelines against Rutgers make?
I think it's big. I think it's a lot bigger than, what people may actually think that it is. And I know that, okay, he's there all week and he can help them prepare. But to look over at Jim Harbaugh on the sideline there, he is the engine that drives that machine, right? And it's a little bit different when you have maybe I wouldn't say disorganized, but the structure on how things are working, it's just not normal, right? People a lot of times, will perform their best when they have, their environment is solidified and consistent, right? You have a consistent working environment that you can apply this to, everybody in all facets of life. When you have a consistent working environment that is positive, that you enjoy going to, typically you will, be a high performer. I think with Jim Harbaugh being on that sideline, when those kids run off the field, they have him to look at. And I just think it's nothing to take away from Jay or from Mike Hart or Sharon or anybody else on that sideline, but it's different when you have to answer to him, right? And how he coaches and those interpersonal relationships. You don't want to let him down, but it's different when you look over there and you know that he's not there. Now he's here. Now it's all systems go. And look, you have 9 games left in this regular season. Every one of them matters. I think it's going to be a monumental impact.
Jim Harbaugh said on Monday, we're going to prepare, we're going to practice, and then we're going to execute. We'll see how that execution goes against the Scarlet Knights of Rutgers. I want to thank our guest this evening, Anthony Bellino from the X's and Bro Show. You see it every morning right here on BCSN. Anthony, thank you so much.
Mark, as always, my friend, a pleasure to join you. Thank you.